Hello, everyone, and welcome to another A2IM Indie Week panel. I'm super excited about this one because it is my first time ever being on a panel that's only fellow women managers. I love it. I'm so excited about this, that I get to talk to other women managers, other managers in general, but it's extra special to me that it's a panel of women music managers. So I will first introduce myself and then ask my fellow panelists to introduce themselves. I am Madeline Nelson. I am a music manager. I manage some artists, some writers, some producers, and I own an indie label and also an independent distribution company. And that's about as interesting as I get. And I want to introduce you to my fellow panelists. I would love to start with you, Ramya. Just give us some of your background and a little bit about the artists you manage.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me. My name is Ramya. I'm originally from Kentucky and lived in New York for about 10 years, and now I'm a new LA resident. My background in music kind of started on accident. I was a door girl in New York and started throwing a lot of parties, and that's how I got connected to some of my earlier clients like GoldLink and Smino and Masego. And now I manage two recording artists, Tommy Genesis and Amalu, and a photographer named Ray BB.
Love it. Beautiful. And thank you for joining the panel. Mira, we have a similar background in that we play in the management side of things and also in the label side of things. Please tell us about that.
So I'm originally from Atlanta and now living in between Chicago and Montreal. And since the pandemic, mostly on the Canadian side. I am a artist manager at my own management company called Port Entertainment, where I work with clients like BbyMutha, Gloria Zendoli, and Iman, as well as multidisciplinary musicians and storytellers. I also, as you were mentioning, have been the GM for Vice Versa, which is a social-based label that is now part of the A2IM BYMA cohort that's currently happening. And we are releasing music in real time. So really excited about that.
What is a social-based label?
A social-based label is something that the two co-founders that I work with, Zendoli, Gloria and Osman, decided that they wanted to create something that was more geared towards the artist, more artist friendly, but also like really taking care of the artist's well-being, mental and physical, really giving them financial tools and financial literacy workshops to really fully grasp and really build out every facet of their business with the tools at their fingertips, essentially. They're like taking the time to develop them not only as an artist, but also as a business owner and as a business person.
Wow, interesting. Very, very interesting. So first thing I want to dive into, because I always think that these stories are super interesting. I would love to know, and we'll start with you, Mira, how you came into artist management.
So similar to what Ramya was saying, I ended up in artist management by an accident. I come from a engineering background. I started my life in aerospace engineering. And in uni, I actually used to have my own radio show. And I didn't really understand or fully grasp the idea that there was even a music industry or it was a business. I only got wind of it when a friend had asked me to negotiate a contract on their behalf, that I fully understood that there was an actual mechanism or an actual business behind this. And I negotiated the contract because it just was something that came to me naturally, just as an advocate for artists and advocate for the creative voice at the end of the day. And I really took to it like fish to water. And it sort of snowballed from there, where one friend told another friend, and they were like, yeah, if you need anything negotiated, just go talk to Mira. She'll end up advocating for you. And then next thing I know, I'm dealing with clients and artists and doing a lot of deal negotiations.
And Mami, I know you did speak to how you came into it when you were introducing yourself. I would love to dive in a little bit deeper to like your beginning experiences in management.
Yeah, absolutely. So I came up under this blog era in New York where everyone wanted to be a blogger or on SoundCloud. And so it's this generation of like SoundCloud music, I would say. And so yeah, equally, I had no idea music management was a thing. I think around that time, even beforehand, no one really talked about like the managers and yeah, especially being a woman, everyone kind of was like, oh, you should be a publicist or you should do this. And I was like, no, like I love the idea of building out a business and multiple businesses for one person. So I got started in nightlife, and then as I met, they were friends at first. So I met like GoldLink, for example, and we met on Twitter and did his first show. And then every time, you know, he would come to New York and he and his team would come to New York, every single time I would add a little bit on to what I was already doing. So whether it was introducing people to brands or producing music videos, things like that, it would slowly start from there. And then, and similarly with Raven, she was like emailing people in third person, but then would switch up the tense in the middle of the email. And I was like, let me just, like, for my sanity, let me just please write this email. So that's kind of how it started, is you know, slowly integrating into the business of my friends. Yeah. And that's why it was a complete accident. I had no idea music management was a thing. To be honest, I watched Never Say Never, didn't even know a music manager like was a real job until I saw it in Never Say Never. So I think I just assumed that label and management was the same thing, and sometimes it is. But I think that's just kind of the misconception. And I didn't see a lot of women in this role.
No, it's so you touched on something interesting, and it's something that I talk about often, and it is that it's not something that, at least for the 30-something years I've been in the music business, that is looked at as like typically one of the traditional roles for women in the music business. And those traditional roles have kind of always stayed the same: publicity, marketing, now brand strategy, but promotions, artist management, tour management have never been looked at as roles for women in the business that are traditional roles for us in the business. Again, another reason why I'm so excited that this particular panel is women managers, because we are out there now. And we absolutely need to communicate with each other and empower one another and share information, because it still seems like a bit of a rare thing. It really does. So I love that you actually touched on that. I want to, another piece that you mentioned, I want to really expand on it, is how you kind of like ended up doing one thing, then another thing, then another thing. So I kind of want to get into with you guys what an artist's expectation should be of their manager, and also what the expectation should not be. I would love to just talk about what it is we actually do, the parts we play, the businesses that we build, and the role that we hopefully don't have to play because somebody else should be doing it. And so, Wyman, I'd love to start with you on that.
Yeah, that's honestly a really good question. I think sometimes, especially in the early stages of management, the assumption is that you do everything all of the time.
Right.
And whether that's, you know, booking an Uber or Lyft, travel, all of that, like sometimes when the team is really small, it's all hands on deck. But really what the sweet spot for a manager is you're managing 5 to 6 businesses for one artist, and that's on the lower end. So keeping in mind that for an artist, expectation of a manager is if I'm, you know, booking your travel, who's talking to your lawyers, who's talking to your business manager, who's talking to your agents about your career. So it's really this, it's a 50-50 harmonious relationship, like business relationship. So let us handle the bigger picture ideas and strategy and execution, and you guys do what you do best, which is make the creative, make the art. So sometimes, you know, things can get a little convoluted in a very small team, but that's really the role of a manager. Is you're the 360 perspective to an artist's entire business, and that can include several of them.
I absolutely agree with you. Mira, what's your take on this particular part of our conversation?
Yeah, I think Ramya hit a lot of great points about building every facet of the business as a partner to the artist. I think the way I sort of word it or use in terms of an analogy is that we're your chief of staff. You're the figurehead, but we're your chief of staff. You know, we are the ones to manage the relationships between agent, your lawyer, your business manager. We are not your personal assistant. We can find people to fill that role for you at the end of the day, but that's not our function. Our function is not to do that. And I joke when I say this, but not really. My job is not really to go get your laundry, procure exotic items, or
I'm sorry. Good point. Very good point.
That is not the function of what I do. Like Ramya said, we are your business partner, and purely interested, and also really want to make sure that you're getting the best that you can on the business side, because we can't really do the music. That's what you're responsible as an artist, is the music. That's really where you should put your focus, and sort of, you know, not get caught up in the nitty gritty of, like, you know, if we are responsible for doing the sort of day-to-day, because there's a day-to-day manager that takes care of things. There's also a personal assistant that also has a functionality that does, you know, personal items. Yeah, I think it's really important also to remember that we're not magic wands.
Right.
We can't build a business when there's something that doesn't exist. I think a lot of artists, a lot of younger artists, get it in their heads that, you know, if I only had this manager, you know, I'll be like the most amazing artist ever. And it doesn't really work that way. It really is that managers build on what's there. There has to be there has to be a core creative, the core something to sort of sink our teeth into, to actually expand upon. We can't just magically make things happen, and I think that's something that we don't do.
Agree with you 1,000%. I think a couple of points before I move on to the next point. Just artists, again, we're in this, all of us, I believe, because we love music and we love artists, and we already have talked a little about, like, being advocates for artists. That's a big deal to us. So in no way is what I'm about to say intended to bash artists, but what I do find is many emerging artists have an expectation of like a microwavable career, and that expectation gets put on us as managers, and so things can get really difficult because oftentimes things look now like they really genuinely happen overnight. We know from inside the business, there's not any true story of an overnight success. We get to know the work that went into something that's made to look like an overnight success. But outside looking in, a lot of new artists don't know what all of those steps were leading up to something. Lizzo is one of the best examples I could think of where everybody thought she literally just came out of nowhere. No one knew her story, not really at first. It was well into us all being blown away by her and her winning awards and being #1 and all those things before she was really publicizing the story of having slept in her car and for how long she had been working at this and why people need to know, that they should embrace the process. And so I believe when we talk about what expectation is of managers, that piece of things is really important to point out, because part of that process is building you, the artist, as a business, because the artist is a business and a brand, right? It's also building a touring business. It's building a merch business. It's building a brand strategy business. It's literally building all of these shoulders of businesses around the artists who is a business themselves. So just great points. I wanted to expand because your points were so good.
I mean, just sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Okay, it's okay.
No, I was just gonna say that I think you're right. The best way to remember it, or if artists can remember it, is that it's a marathon.
Yes.
It's not a sprint, and I think there's two things artists should be focusing on: music and fans, and that's it.
Agreed.
I think like a way to frame it though too is that it's an equal investment, right? As much as the artist is entrusting us, or as much as like we're putting our time and energy into an artist, they equally have to trust us and put that same investment into us as well. Because this is also time, a lot of time that we're taking out of our career day, our lives, away from our families, our friends, to really uplift and build these careers out. So that's why it has to be a 50-50 partnership. And that's when you really hit the sweet spot, when you think about it as a mutual investment.
Yeah. When you touch on that, so mutual investment, yes, because it's in the beginning, all of us have started where our artists were brand new. Like none of us started with an artist that like already was like a megastar. I maybe one of my clients now, but that was like super late in my career. But so what happens is at first you're not even making money. So it really is like your blood, sweat, and tears. It's the same for the artist. It's the same thing. So you're right. And that to me is what truly makes it equal investment. From when you're starting off at the beginning of an artist's career, they're not making money yet. Therefore, you're not making money yet. So you guys really are putting equal trust in one another. And I always think of an artist as this human beings, this person's life is literally in my hands, which is kind of, makes you a little bit nervous, but also makes you want to do your best, your very best by them.
Well, I mean, I don't think any of us would be doing this if we didn't believe in who we were wanting to work with. Like, yeah, I think that's something that, I don't take on clients that I don't believe in. If I'm saying that I want to work with you, or if there's like it's because I believe in you, I believe in your art. Yeah. And I don't think a good manager would not.
I've seen managers take on clients that they didn't particularly believe in.
Which then comes to the point that you lose the trust then that Ramya was talking.
Yeah. So we talked about what the artist expectation should be of us, what expectations they should not have. I'd love to now get into the expectations and relationships we have or would like to have with artist labels. Whether we've an artist who's on an indie label or a major label, the expectations and exchange and relationship we feel should be happening between us, between management teams and label teams. Mira, do you want to start with that?
Sure. I think for me, my expectation from labels, major or indie, is really that whoever they end up signing, they should have real passion for the project at the end of the day, because we're really looking to sort of make sure that the partner that we're partnering up to is really an extension of the vision that the artist has for their project, for their career. Mm-hmm. I think, a lot of people are really gung-ho about signing artists and go on a signing spree, and it's great, like it's empowering, but if the artist becomes low-hanging fruit at the end of the day, the expectation on both sides is that it becomes harder to work that relationship, harder to meet and align for both of the businesses. We want to help labels make great business, great success, and vice versa. So we're sitting as managers in between the artist and the label, and really trying to connect the bridge between the two to ensure success on both ends.
I agree. Ramya, what's your take on management team and label relationship?
There's always this like undertone of us versus them. And I look at a label as the extension of the team. Otherwise, why work with them? So you need a team and you need an infrastructure to put out your music. And money, you need lots of money. So it really is, if each person owns their vertical within marketing, PR, your A&R, and then you have your manager, that ecosystem that you're creating around your business, which your music is ultimately, that's when it really thrives, when you have the right cocktail of people to really make your music push it as far as you possibly can. So sometimes I feel like there's this, this us versus them mentality, but really when you look at it as extensions of your team, you need all of these people to empower your music and also fight for you in the room when you're not there. And that when signing to a label, you get that all over the world. And that's the benefit to it. So yeah, that's just kind of my position of looking at it. I don't see it as the functionality of a label across the board, no matter if it's an indie or a major, is the exact same. They distribute your music and they market it, and that's really it. But when you have the right people and you have space at that label, that's when it can go as far as you can possibly take it.
So like the key person that brings you into the label, it's important, for an example, I guess, to ensure that key person is part of your contract as well, because they're the ones who are really going to advocate on your behalf as the artist with their counterparts at the team, because they're the most passionate about your project.
Agreed. I want to jump to something, but also again, each time either one of you speaks, like I just think about something that would be incredible to expand on, and just the one point of how often artists can get signed and then become less of a priority than they were when they got signed. And you know, just how as a manager, as a management team, you know, it's our job to then fight for the prioritization of our artists. And that's another piece that you have to measure your steps. You have to understand, you know, who to talk to. It's not as simple as some people might think it is, because at some point you're literally trying to cajole people into moving your artists up, you know, in their mind to where you believe they should be. And so that's just another piece of things that I've so often seen be a real struggle, because on the management side, you don't have control of what the label's priorities are. So you're dealing with that as well. You're dealing with needing to make sure that you're in there and you're, you know, daily fighting to make your artists a priority at whatever label they're at. So that's just another piece that I think is really important to understand is part of day-to-day life of a manager.
I would like to sort of pose a question to your side, Madeline. You had briefly brought up when you were, I believe, at Warner, did I get that wrong?
Sony, when I was at Sony.
Oh, Sony, about Brockhampton and their signing and how they got demoted to red.
Oh, this was Odd Future.
Sorry, Odd Future, my bad.
Odd Future. When they got signed over there, there was another artist. What was her name? They both were like really had like amazing numbers at somewhere out in social media or internet world. And but Odd Future ended up being the artist of those two signings that there was like a battle around the labels for, if you remember. They ended up getting, I use the word demoted. They were brought to the distribution company, Red. So they were no longer a priority at Columbia, at the major label. They were now at the distribution company. And lo and behold, it wasn't long before they were outselling, and I'm not kidding you, every one of the major artists across all the labels over there in merch. And that, for me, what that taught me was about an artist understanding their audience, a label needing to really understand the artist, a label needing to be signing the artist for the right reason, artist development needing to come back into play. It really touched on so many things, because at that time that I was there, Justin Bieber had just like he rose to fame, you know, really quickly. However, the work had been put in on YouTube, as we know. And then he had an artist that they were signing who kind of like was along the same path, but we all know did not have the same success. She had a single that had great success, but her career didn't have the same success. So everybody was betting on YouTube stars, and a couple of our labels did that. And a couple of those artists, a few of those artists did not do well at all past the first single. So, and that wasn't because management wasn't advocating. It was because the thing that was so sorely missing was your reasoning for how you prioritize that artist as the label, I mean. And then understanding like exactly what it is, who it is you're signing, and then how you have to work that particular project, you know? So I'm glad you brought that up. really glad you brought that up because it touches on a lot of things. So the fact that they were selling merch like that, it ended up being like a case study in this program that I was doing, that they were selling out shows and merch. And I mean, we all know Tyler to this day continues to, I still try to make sure I get a piece of his merch drop every time he comes out. And I've like aged way out of wearing merch from Tyler, the Creator, but it's a hype that you just kind of can't avoid once you fall into it. So yeah, really, really interesting that you brought that up.
Well, because we're seeing that trend come back again with TikTok, where everybody's trying to sign every TikToker. And I think there's that gap again between, that viral success, but really setting them up for long-term success and what that development period looks like. And it's again, it's not, even for labels, I think not all, I'm saying it can be it often seems like rather that it's also like a popcorn artist or a microwavable artist that can blow up overnight and have success. And sorry, go ahead.
No. Just it's the same thing. It's like it's the YouTube thing happening all over again with TikTok. You're right, and I know you guys see also labels making that same mistake, the assumption that those numbers are going to convert into streams, kind of without you having to do the work. You know what I mean? And it's just not always the case. It's been the case a couple of times. It's always going to be the case once or twice. It's not going to be the case across massive amounts of artists. There's development that has to be done. There's real work that has to be done, because that audience does not necessarily convert. And an action that they're taking on a platform that they love does not mean that they're going to take an action on one of the streaming platforms. It doesn't mean they're going to move their attention to a streaming platform, because by the way, they could hear the song where they are. So you have to put some work into it. And that's definitely an expectation of a label.
I think that just speaks to consistency though. The thing with Tyler is that he could take 10 years to make an album, but the product supersedes anyone's expectations.
Yes.
So even with signing a YouTube artist, and effectively right now, all of our artists are TikTok artists and YouTube artists now, because of how things are just moving along. But it's just consistency after that is, okay, you have this viral single, but what comes after it? And so when to have space and to create space at a label is truly based off consistency. And that can be on a very small, independent niche level. It doesn't have to be on a pop scale. It can be a really small subsect of dedicated fan base. But I think that's kind of like the trigger word, is pure consistency in whatever format that needs to look for the artist development.
I couldn't agree with you more about that. I could not agree with you more about consistency. So I have a question for you guys. Mine already popped in my head, but what has been just one of, I know we've had many, but what's been one of your biggest obstacles as a manager?
That's a tough.
Yeah, that's a tough question.
I'm gonna bring up a recent one because I'm like, this one kind of hurts a little bit, but I think it's important to showcase the sort of vulnerable elements to our business. Is losing a client. I think losing a client is a tough. It can be a tough challenge to sort of come back from that. And you've put in all of this time, all of this effort to line up all of these amazing things. And then one day it's sort of like pulling the rug back from underneath you. how do you overcome that, and how do you sort of, bring yourself back from that? And I think a lot of managers, and myself included, we always, and maybe this is something that is based on age, or even being as women, is that we immediately think, oh, what did I do wrong?
Right.
And
Internalize, we personalize.
right. And I don't think that's fair. Like, I don't think that's fair to yourself. I don't think that's fair to say that. I think at the end of the day, it's a relationship that ran its course, like every other relationship that you would have, whether it be family or friends or, partners or whatever. And I think that is a tough challenge to sort of come from losing it, to then sort of owning that it's ended, that it's time to move on. It's time to get back on your feet and figure out the next step, and the next figuring out how to pivot during that time period. I think that's been one of my recent challenges, and something that I'm learning from daily.
That is a tough one, and I'm so glad that that's the one you decided to share, because yeah, that is tough. I've been through it, and everything that you just described, I went through, to get to the other side of realizing it really had just run its course, and there were more exciting things for me and for the artist, and we wouldn't have been able to accomplish those things if we were still working together. So yeah, definitely. What about you, Ramya?
Honestly, yeah, I totally understand that. I read a book called Sacred Contracts by Carolyn Myss, and it basically talks about that, of how before you're born, you sign this agreement with the universe, and you agree to all the good and the bad of what happens in life. And she uses like Helen Keller as an example. She wouldn't have been Helen Keller if she wasn't blind and deaf. So keeping that in mind, of when your time, like, to lose that client sucks for sure. But as you said, Madeline, you couldn't have done the other stuff if you were still working together. And that's kind of like accepting the new energy and whatever is supposed to come your way. I think for me, what's challenging as a manager is that this is self-inflicted, but I feel like it's hard for me to ask for help. I feel like I have to do everything, or figure out how to do everything. And that's the part of, like, it's a little bit of control, but also kind of letting go to say, admit like, listen, this isn't defeat. This doesn't mean I can't do it, but like, I have to call someone to really help me figure this out, or help me with this thing, or tag team them in, and relying on them to do it. So I think that's kind of a challenging thing for me, is to recognize when, like, wait, this is out of my depths. Let me phone a friend.
Wow. I love that you can admit that. That's important, because that means you know exactly how to avoid that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to knowing ourselves is the most beautiful thing, because then we know how to work around our own craziness.
Mm-hmm.
For me, there's something similar. It's not a particular thing. It is having to tell artists when I don't agree with strategy or thought process on release and things like that. Because so often, and I know you go through this, an artist will finish their project, by the way, after telling us that the project will be finished next week, then they suddenly finish it. And this thing comes over them, and it's like, okay, it's coming out next week, right? And we're like, no, like we have to plan. And they're like, yeah, but I told you I was finishing it a month ago. Like, yeah, but we didn't hear the music.
Mhm.
We didn't live with the music. We didn't get to strategize around it. We didn't get to like choose the series of singles. Like all this process. So one of the biggest obstacles or challenges for me is getting the artist to really believe in process
Mhm.
and really not be afraid to take their time and understand. You said it earlier, Mira, it's a marathon.
Mhm.
It really is. And if it's not, what you do find is that microwave ability that turns into very short-lived careers. That's my biggest. It's almost time for us to wrap up. So I would love to end on a note of asking you women what advice you would give to the emerging artists, the truly emerging, I'm just getting into it, I'm very wet behind the ears and don't have a clue really what I'm doing, artist. What advice would you give them?
I think really it's something that is so core is the creative. Focusing on the music, focusing on knowing who you are as an artist, figuring out that identity is so important, because I think now with the digital age, everybody's an artist. There's like 60,000 songs, I think, per day that get delivered to the DSPs. And if you want to stand out to the crowd or to the people, focus on yourself. I know it's a really hard thing to do considering how immediate everything is available to everybody through social media. I think it's hard sometimes, but it's really sort of really knowing and understanding your creativity. You obviously make music as an artist because you love to do it. So honing in on that passion for making art, for making music, is really the most important thing to focus. And then really connecting with your niche audience. Starting with that foundation is going to set you up for, and continuing, I should say, like we were talking about consistency, continuing that same repetitive focus on music, on fans, you're going to build, and you're going to build great connections with great people because you're connecting with people through your music. And that genuine connection is really going to make you the best artist that you can be at the end of it.
Could not agree more. I absolutely could not agree more. Ramya, what is your nugget? What's your piece of advice?
Yeah, Mira, you got a lot of the good ones. I think one, and we touched on this before, is just because it's finished does not mean it needs to come out immediately. It takes time and setup and building the creative and real strategy when you want to come out strong. I think a lot of artists have this misconception that they want to come out the paint like Frank Ocean. I think that's on everybody's mood board. I want to be Frank Ocean. What people forget is that Frank Ocean had an existing platform when he came out the gate. He had all of his friends promoting his music and talking about it. And that's really important, is to build a circle of people, however wide it needs to be, and empower them to support and build out your team, however that looks like. And it takes a long time. All of our favorite artists, whether they may be considered new right now, but they've been in the game for like 10 years before anything really stuck. From bad singles and bad mixtapes to different management, and you're going to go through the gambit to find that team that works for you. So I think once you have the internal workings established and you know what that consistency looks like, that's when you can make the strategy for the long game. which is the marathon.
100%.
It is the marathon. So we've got focus on the art and build your core fan base. Those are the two most important pieces of advice I also would give to a brand new artist. Those are the things I would stress. And I hate to stress that we are out of time because I love being in this conversation. I could talk to you all day long. I hope everybody watching gets some great takeaways from this panel. Thank both of you so much for joining me on this panel. I cannot wait until we meet again.
Thank you so much,
Thank you
Madeline.
so much.